I'm with Peje Emilsson, a serial entrepreneur in PR and education, amongst many other things. Drawing on your experience advising governments and businesses, how can entrepreneurs best navigate the European regulatory landscape?
I think you need to have real discussions and look at the future. I'm looking at a single market for education and healthcare in Europe 2045. Because all those areas are controlled by politicians, lots of detailed regulations, which makes it quite difficult for entrepreneurs to come in and provide new ideas. Look at what has happened in industry, the dramatic changes in productivity. You work in a different way, and education is, as you know, very, very traditional. So we have to rethink the role of political control and entrepreneurship in education, and that will, in 20 years' time, create an extremely strong position for Europe.
And later on today, I understand that you're going to be speaking on startup culture in Europe. And that goes, I would think, to the heart of what you've just outlined. Is there a problem in Europe from an entrepreneurial perspective in terms of embracing risk?
Yeah, I think there is a problem because you have still too much traditional control in sectors like healthcare and education. And if you take those two sectors, it's over 25% of the economy.
Heavily regulated.
Heavily regulated and not very efficient. Just give you one example. I checked for knee operations in Sweden, and a private operator could do it at 60% of the cost. And of course, then we pay for it by taxpayers' money, but then we use taxpayers' money in a more efficient way. And that's very important. Then we can give more healthcare, better healthcare to more people.
How do you see the problem being resolved, though?
I think you need a common agreement on initiating that concept, one single market. But then you have to open up for much easier ways to start. Because the problem is that you put a raster of lots of problems. I was running a few academies in the UK, and it's a bloody bureaucracy with lots of difficulties in doing that. So you have to give more freedom. We did that in Sweden, 1990. Before that, 99% of all Swedes went to government-controlled schools. And then we introduced a voucher, which meant that, okay, if you don't like the education the government school gives you, take the same amount of money and go to an independent school. That school cannot charge any money. It's not co-pay, and that has led to
school choice.
School choice and competition. And now, 30 years later, close to 500,000 Swedes, 25% of the Swedes go to independent schools. It's a fairly dramatic change. And that competition now with 290 municipalities and 500 independent operators has meant to different kinds of education. People are different, you have a choice, and you get competition, and you get better education for less money.
Fascinating. I love your passion about education. You've also mentioned healthcare before. Yeah. Where do you see the best opportunities in Europe at the moment?
You see, when I was in politics once upon a time, I was on the board of all hospitals in Stockholm. At that time, we were 8 million Swedes and 10,000 doctors. Now we are 10 million Swedes and 50,000 doctors. There is no lack of doctors. There's no lack of capacity. But rules, regulations, traditions use that doctors are spending much less time on caring for people. And the same with education. Rules means that you teach 20 hours a week in some governmental schools. We give 30 hours a week, and then you get more education. So I think in both two areas, you need to see as a politicians, what is our role? To provide best healthcare and education to the people in an efficient way, and then let's open up for private entrepreneurs that can use new technology.
But you are unique in that you have a specific model for the schools that you set up. Can you just briefly tell us about that knowledge?
Basic is that it's individuals are different. You know, some, and when you're teaching, some are best at reading, some are best at listening, some are best at writing. So we look at the individual way for each one, and then we try to cater individual systems. So one coach meets all his 20 students 15 minutes every week and discuss, okay, what have you done this week, what will you do next? Very few parents spend 15 serious minutes every week with their children discussing what they are doing. I think that is one of the basic ideas. You know, it's not rocket science, it's fairly simple, but you individualize education as far as possible. And lots of the inspiration, I should say, comes from the UK. You know, that's where we got it. And then we moved to India. And India is a market which new countries are more prepared to do it in different ways, you know.
And just sort of dive in a little bit deeper into your approach. Public-private partnerships is something that you've championed as key to...
Exactly. And what we are really talking about is private-public partnership. You know, that's what I'm working so much about in the kingdom, where I see the enormous challenge and possibility, because you have good education for 10%. The 2030 program calls for much more of independent education. It has not yet happened. But I think I got lots of inspiration what's happening there. And I think we in Europe can learn from them. And that's why let's Europe get together and set the 2045 program.
Given your experience at CREA, this is your consultancy business this time, you really understand narratives and building trust. What advice can you give in terms of doing this at a European level?
I think the key thing is to get entrepreneurs, businessmen together. You know, in my experience, having been in politics and having been in business, there are different careers. There are very, very few in business that are really active in politics, and you don't understand the various things. You need a much deeper involvement from the young entrepreneurial generation that are now developing the new tech industry, and to understand that, and to understand how politicians think. And
they're different worlds.
They have completely different roads. So I think this kind of event is, of course, extremely important, where you get this kind of dialogue. And to realize the change that's coming in. You know, when I started, since then, GDP per capita is 4 times larger. You know, people have become so much richer everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, the world is so much better. But the role of politicians has not completely changed, and they still believe that they are the custodians of education and healthcare.
Yeah.
So you will have very intense discussion about what will happen at NHS and HS in the future, how to get a better productivity there.
Fantastic for that. Obviously, we are at the FII summit in Tirana.
Yep.
What's your top advice for entrepreneurs out there who are looking at Europe today and thinking, do I invest? How do I invest? What's your top advice as someone who's making it in Europe?
Look at the countries that are experiencing difficulties in the field of education and healthcare. They are more open to see other alternatives. There are lots of opportunities in Germany for the time being, for example. But then you have to take country by country basis. But most people don't believe, well, education and healthcare, what is that? You know, you do gaming and lots of things, and using high tech in banking. And I said, if you can use that high tech in providing better education and better healthcare. When I left as chairman of Stockholm Chamber of Commerce, I gave a grant of 5,000 euros to a new startup company which is called Dr. Kry, using new technology. They have now close to 4 million contacts with patients every year, combination of digital and then you go to the doctor sometimes. You know, it's, and of course at a much lower cost for the taxpayers if you use that efficiency. So you have to get in the ideas for the private initiatives, and it requires an understanding.
Mr. Emilsson, thank you for joining us on FI Institute TV. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.